don't own me. You can't tell me when or where I'm out of line, or try to get me to live my life according to your rules. You don't even know what I am, Dad. You don't know who I am. You don't know how I feel, what I think. And if I try to explain it the rest of your life, you will never understand. You are 30 years older than I am. You and your whole lousy generation believes the way it was for you is the way it's got to be. And not until your whole generation has lain down and died will the dead weight of you be off our backs. You understand? You've got to get off my back. Dad, you're my father. I'm your son. I love you. I always have, and I always will. But you think of yourself as a colored man. I think of myself as a man.
Right on. Right on. Good evening and welcome to Crossfire. I'm your host for the night. My name is Richard Chi Dighton. I'm sitting in for the great Norman Oliver, and I thank him for this opportunity to come on and host this show. Tonight we're going to have a star-studded show. In the beginning of the show, I wanted to talk about Black History. Black History is this month, February. Though we should celebrate it every single month, every single day, 365, like McDonald's says. We celebrate it in February, so we should learn more about our Black history facts. Well, one of the things that, when you go back in time to our Black history, we go to the Moors, who invaded Spain and stayed in Spain over 700 years. And a lot of people might not know about Moors, but you know about some of the things they've done. Some of the greatest cars that we've had, not the greatest, but some of the cars that we've had in America have been named after Moor cities, one of which is Seville. The other, Cordova, Granada. These are cars that came through in American history. Seville is still a classic Cadillac car, but they were named after Moorish cities when the Moors conquered Spain thousands of years ago, I guess. I'm going to say thousands, but I don't know how many it was. Today I have a very, very interesting guest on me. We're going to bring the guest in when we come right back. What I have put together is a part of a documentary that I plan to show with the permission of LAPA and other folks on a Saturday event. And this is something I talked about on the show earlier, which is called Prison by Another Name. I don't know if they have it queued up yet. My guy left here on the camera. But if they have it queued up, we're going to go to that. We're going to watch a few minutes of that. And I'm going to come back with my guest. And we're going to talk about how prison has impacted our community, how prison has been used since the end of slavery as a means to still have us as slaves. And slaves meaning we're working, we're generating money without getting any of the benefits. That's what we did as slaves. We worked the fields, we worked everything. We made America rich. America is still rich because of our labor. And now our prison systems are still making some people rich. So let's watch this documentary and I'll be right back.
Mr. President, I have a brother about 14 years old. A man hired him from me and I heard of him no more. He went and sold him to McGree and they's been working him in prison for 12 months. I asked him to let me have him, but he won't let him go.
For a period of nearly 80 years, between the Civil War and World War II, Black Southerners were no longer slaves, but they were not yet free. In one of the most shameful and little-known chapters of American history, generations of Black Southerners were forced to labor against their will.
From almost the first moment, white Southerners were responding to try to put African Americans back into a position as close to slavery as they possibly could.
The Old South and what was quickly becoming the New South could not proceed without the work of African Americans.
But if you had something for free in the past, you don't necessarily want to pay for it now.
It was a straight, simple, exploitative system. There was only power, there was only force, and there was only brutality.
What happened in that period of time was so much more terrible than anything most Americans recognize or understand today. The depth of poverty, the inability of African Americans to access any of the mechanisms of wealth achievement and growth, are all rooted in this terroristic kind of regime that existed in so many places.
Their ability to have what we call the American dream. That is what has been stolen from black folks all through the South. And that legacy has to be understood so that people will be able to speak to it and give our ancestors voice.
My name is Sharon Malone, and my family is originally from Wilcox County, Alabama. My father was born in 1893. As a child, I never knew why Dad didn't share many of the stories growing up in the rural South. There was so little that I actually knew about, the generations beyond my parents. And I realized, I said, why don't I know these stories, and why don't I know who those people are? African Americans are innately wired to want to know who we are. It's almost like being an adopted child. We have no understanding of not only what we have endured, but what we have survived.
Freedom, oh, freedom.
Freedom must have felt glorious to those who'd never known it. With the end of the Civil War and the passage of the 13th Amendment, 4 million former slaves could embark on new lives with no one in charge but themselves.
And go home to my Lord and be free.
And what they desired more than anything was independence. They wanted independence from white owners. They wanted their own churches. They wanted their own schools. They wanted freedom to move.
African Americans after emancipation are looking at the potential not only to enjoy and receive freedom, but to live it. They're deeply committed to reaffirming marriage vows. They're deeply committed to reconstituting families.
Ezekiel Archie, born into slavery, was 6 when freedom came. His mother moved the family, Zeke, his 2 brothers and a sister, from Georgia to Alabama, away from the old plantation and toward a new future.
African Americans were willing to work very hard and exploit themselves in the same way that immigrants who have come to this country have exploited themselves and their families with long work days. They were willing to do that, but they wanted to own their own land. They wanted to control those hours. They wanted to be the ones to decide.
John Davis was born a dozen years after the war. He grew up in freedom, working hard on an Alabama farm rented by his parents.
there was a tremendous motivation and desire to integrate into American life.
Green Cottenham, born in 1885, was also the son of an Alabama farmer. He came of age in a nation that was increasingly urban, industrial, and modern.
This is a photo of George Cottingham. He's my great-grandfather. He was actually Green Cottingham's first cousin. How hopeful my Cottingham ancestors must have been about bright futures for their family. These were hard-working, honest people.
But freedom had come at a tremendous cost. The war devastated the Southern economy, which had supported one of the wealthiest aristocracies in the world.
The cotton economy was in complete shambles. The fields had been burned, the cotton gins had been destroyed. Equipment that was necessary for the production of cotton didn't exist anymore. But also the primary engine of the economy, of the cotton economy, that being the labor of slaves, was lost.
In the 5 major cotton states of the Deep South, nearly half of all capital, nearly half of all investment was in human beings. So when those human beings were confiscated, when the investment was transferred, in essence, from slaveholders to the people themselves, that meant a huge loss of capital to Southern slaveholders, to the people who controlled the economy of the South.
A tiny slave-holding elite had owned the majority of the region's 4 million slaves. Among them was Lucinda Comer, a widow. After the war, she and her sons oversaw the family's enterprises in cotton, lumber, and corn.
I'm the great-great-granddaughter of B.B. Comer, who was the governor of Alabama, and the great-great-niece of J.W. Comer. The things that I heard about the Comer men, especially B.B. Comer, were about their entrepreneurial spirit and being self-made men. There was never a fool or a coward, it was said, in the Comer family.
Emancipation turned the former slaveholding world upside down.
The simple reality of people that they had once owned now were entitled to the same fruits of their labor, the same ability to look a white person in the eye, a man or a woman, and to demand equal respect, to be called by one's first and last names, challenged everything to the bitter core of white people's souls.
You have a group of people who are accustomed to have people serve them. Now, suddenly, these people are free. They own guns. You'd be as wary as hell. Because what you're worried is that people are going to take revenge. You also are worried that people aren't going to do any work anymore.
Most of the South's 8 million whites had not owned slaves. Poverty was widespread.
Wow. That was just a brief part of Slavery by Another Name. And if you haven't seen that in its entirety, I really pray and hope that you go out and see it, because it's not just about slavery and the black thing. It's about the prison system and how the prison system impacts us. And not just in Delaware, but just in America, period. America is the #1 leading place of incarceration in the world. We incarcerate more people than anybody in the world. I think some places put together, we're at another alarm. So I'm going to turn this over to a professional who knows more about the data and statistics of incarceration and how incarceration works. And we're going to have a dialogue about how it's working in Wilmington especially. I'm bringing to you no other than the master of ceremonies on many events, but the prolific, world-renowned prison reentry person, none other than Mr. Pastor D. How you doing, sir?
Gee, thank you for having me. Oh, boy. And what a great piece and a great way to start a dialogue concerning what Michelle Alexander calls the new age of Jim Crow, mass incarceration in an age of color blindness, which we know isn't colorblind.
Right.
You accurately have placed the history of prison in America, aside from the fact that some Quakers or some Christians in upstate Pennsylvania in the 1800s developed the architectural design. They developed the repentance boxes where they would put people in isolation for a period of time. Nobody else believed in that mess, isolating people for a period of time and then having them repent. And the prison architectural design grew out of that. But the history of prison is rooted in the Constitution, the unfinished work of our Constitution, where our Constitution says slavery is hereby abolished except for punishment purposes after a person has been duly convicted of a felony. And that word felony is still applicable to many of us today, which is why reentry is the new Revolutionary War for the black man today and for many other people of color, Hispanics, and other minorities in this country still face the dangers of
well, look, let's go to Delaware. When we look at Delaware and the budget that Delaware spends on our prison population,
$250 million.
$250 million that are spent. That's a large portion of our budget. And this is based off the assumption that we have roughly 5,000 to 6,000 people incarcerated at any time, and we spend $30,000 a year per inmate.
Yeah, I believe $250 million is modest. That's how much the state gives, or how much we give the state for prisons. But when we talk about the plastic for the shields, we talk about the uniform contracts, we talk about other contracts that exist that make the prison system run. We talk about the building that they're doing right now. We're talking about well over $250 million.
Okay, if I was to tell you today that, you know what, we're about to close the prison down. People will stop committing crimes. We're about to close Gander Hill down because there's not enough people to fill Gander Hill. What would you say?
I would say that's not going to happen.
Why?
Simply because there's always been crime, there's always been the rule of law, and there's always been punishment. I don't suggest that prison as a system should not exist.
Right.
I suggest that it's broken. I suggest that it's unfair, it's imbalanced, and I suggest that it has a guileful purpose.
Okay, many people, you know, include myself, when you look at how prisons really started getting crowded, and saying in the 88s and 90s when the drug wars and different things came up, there was something called Truth in Sentencing.
Yeah, TIS,
Truth in Sentencing Guidelines. When these guidelines came in, it made people who didn't have violent crimes end up with a lot of time based off of you know, the judge's right to do that. And I think that's been now since rescinded, or they're trying to work on changing that.
Well, there have always been Jim Crow kind of laws, which is why Michelle Alexander called her book The New Jim Crow. There have always been laws in America that negatively impacted a race of people, namely black people. There have always been, before there were drug laws, before there was TIS, Truth in Sentencing, there were minimum mandatory stipulated sentences, there was SENTAC, other sentencing guidelines. There have always been mechanisms in the American structure that are designed specifically to denigrate and to manipulate the darker people, to incarcerate them. Prison is just another mechanism of birth control, or keeping our numbers down, keep us from being competitive. Remember, with the abolishment of slavery, as chattel slavery, that is, that form of slavery, it caused a problem. And so the merchants had to come together, and the big muckety-mucks, as I called them in Europe, everybody on the world economy market had to come together and figure out, okay, what are we going to do to keep this people from rising up and becoming as wealthy and as powerful as us? And prison, I would suggest, is one way of doing that. Not that people don't deserve to be punished. I certainly did when I went to prison, but I did not deserve the result of prison. That is why, again, re-entry is the revolution.
Okay, so listen, now, you know, and I'm jumping in here because I got to jump in. You know, I got to jump in with you, my man. You know, I love you. Got a lot of respect for you. But now, when you talk about prison, when you went to prison back in
77.
In 77. So let's say that 77 to the 87 range of prison. guys went to prison. I knew guys who went to prison. They got trades. They be hairstylists, bricklayers, electricians, HVAC guys. And some guys actually in the field today, working in the construction field, who learned these trades in prison. How much has that changed from when you were there to now?
I was in Smyrna when the barber industry and the beauty salon industry came in. Guys like Bay McCants and others came home from the east side, came home with barbering trades. And many of them began to open up barbershops. So what happens? Now laws have been placed in the Delaware legislature which prohibit them from being barbershop owners, prohibit them from getting their license to cut hair. And so every time something comes up, I went to college in prison. We went to, we had Delaware State University of Delaware and those sorts of things. But again, they were preparing people too well for release.
So now, now I said this earlier, I said, a lot of people complain saying we shouldn't give inmates education because education's high. They got in trouble. They deserve to do their time. And the statement I made earlier today was that we understand that the cost of education is high, but let's look at the cost of ignorance.
The cost of incarceration is higher than the cost of education. It takes roughly $15,000 to educate a person or to get them through a fairly decent educational opportunity. $36,000 per year to hold a man in prison. But we don't want to educate us. Here's why reentry is important.
Wait. Hold that thought right there, right? Because I want to touch this. The average educational level of Delaware, according to Carl Danberg, is a 6th grade education. If they completed a 6th grade, not saying that all guys are 6th grade.
Those are new statistics. That wasn't so in the 60s, in the 70s, 80s, and what have you. Recently, as more and more younger offenders have dropped out of school, committed heinous crimes,
but that's what I said it is now.
Compare that to the length of their sentence.
Right.
You take a guy without a high school diploma or a college education who offends and gets 3 minimum mandatory years and put him back on the street, he's likely going to reoffend. You take the same person who gets out after 5 years, has a GED, has a high school diploma or some sort of trade, he's likely not to reoffend. Why? Because he has a marketable skill or education that he can use to reintegrate into society.
So do you think that prison sentences should be termed or should be phased so that people who go to jail, if you don't have your GED or high school diploma, if you have over a year or year and a half, that it should be a requirement that you complete that program before you are released? Do you think that would be fair?
I don't think, I'm past thinking, I know from experience. Prison sentences are not where the problem lies. People are sentenced unfairly. Due process is the issue. Equal protection is the issue. A judge does and should have the discretion to apply the appropriate sentence based on the offense. If somebody rapes your mother or murders your son, who am I to say that that person should not receive a particular kind of sentence? However, when we know 65% of those who are incarcerated for less than violent crimes, less than a Class A, Class B felony, are going to come back, isn't it a setup not to make a pathway to citizenship for them? Now, if we are in Washington, D.C., fighting for a pathway to citizenship for a Mexican person or a Cuban person or some other immigrant, and we're willing to enact laws, and we will hang President Obama for even suggesting that he's going to make a pathway for citizenship for an immigrant when we don't have a pathway to full citizenship for people who were born right here on American soil, paid American taxes, made a mistake, and should have a way to be full citizens.
I'm in total agreement with you on that, but this is another fact. 98% of all inmates eventually get out of prison.
And
eventually,
87% return.
Right, because they don't have the skill set necessary. So
I'm suggesting it's by design. If you look at the probation
so what do we do though?
Policies.
What at this point?
Well, one of the things we do is
what can we do?
One of the things we do is what you're doing now. One, education. The other thing we do is demonstration. We've got to demonstrate and demand that legislators and others quit milking the reentry issue for personal profit. We got to see to it that we don't privatize the prison system in America. We got to see to it that legislatures and others are held accountable. People who get dollars for reentry programs ought to be monitored and watched, and those programs that money ought to get to the people, job training programs. And so we have to raise this issue that the prison complex itself in America is broken. It does need to be addressed. It does need to be fixed. And we can fix it if we make it a front burner issue.
So should we shift our focus to prevention? Should we shift our focus on prevention? You know, and this is a conversation that people have. Should we focus our limited resources right now on our young guys?
But that's a trick, Chief. I've heard that language for the past 5 years. Since December 1996 when I came home, I've been involved in attempting to elevate the reentry discussion. People have begun to say, well, we ought to forget about those people and start with the babies. When you deal with reentry, you are dealing with prevention. My younger son was sent to me at 14 when I came home from prison. Because I came home a changed individual, I was able to parent him and prevent him from being like me and going to prison. Today, he's on American Idol somewhere. And so when you deal with reentry, you're dealing with prevention. What we want to do is shift the discussion so we don't have to do anything about the horrid conditions.
It's like you said earlier, my thing about reentry is everybody's jumping on the reentry bandwagon.
Yes, they are.
Everybody's jumping on a reentry carpet. There is no magic wand that we have a magic reentry wand that's going to change it and fix everything. But everybody's saying they're doing it. Some people have the money. They won't give the money to the people who really can make a difference, I feel. Some people who understand it, who've been through it, who knows the struggle, who's seen it, whether firsthand or like the lady who wrote the book, secondhand, she understood it. And she researched it, but there are people who have been through it, lived it, even if their parent or their father was in jail for years, they still got to feel what it's like for the prison because they was away from their loved ones. These people don't get the resources. It's always the people who invite these people to the table, get their ideas, and then take it and go get the grants and the money, and the money never filters back to us.
Delaware has one problem, Jay. We will not invest or believe in those who are among us. I'm talking names like Wolfie, Coley Hobson, Sean Allen, others who are formerly incarcerated people who have proven track records of having solutions to the problem.
They invite those guys to the table.
They will jump over top of them. When I
say they invite them to the table first, get their ideas.
Only to say we invite them.
Yeah, but get their ideas and then diffuse them a little bit.
But they will give the contract
to somebody else.
I went to a forum here for some guys who were out of the prison system, formerly lifers, in Graterford. And I sat in the circle with some top officials, including the new commissioner of prisons here. And the guys made a PowerPoint presentation, and everybody clapped and said, oh, how wonderful it was. I said, well, I understand that there was a guy, an ex-inmate that came to Graterford named Derek Johnson, and he trained you guys, and that he's from here. And they said, yeah, that brother, he's great, man. If y'all could get him in the room. I said, well, he's in the room, you know, the church song. But the people who do this are allowed to do this, and some politicians help them to do this for a piece of porridge.
If it's not their idea, it's a dumb idea.
Well, it's not that, G. It's sheer greed.
Okay,
it's sheer greed.
But I feel like sometimes you can come up with something, say, maybe we should go to the left, then turn right.
Yeah.
They'll say, no, maybe we should go to the right, then come back left, then turn right. The same exact thing. Like people I've seen them do it.
Here's what it is,
and get their ideas and then don't use them, but then turn around later on and regurgitate it, and then some type of form use the very thing that the person said a year prior.
Here's what it is, Chief. The Hope Commission, much of the Hope Commission's work, their entire reentry process, Pastor D wrote that stuff.
I remember you was on the board.
A bunch of work. The reason they don't want Pastor D is I'm homegrown. You know my dirt. You know my weaknesses and issues. We want to pretend that we only work with people of integrity and people who don't have flaws. We grabbed Johnny from Detroit and we put him in a position. If we would go to Detroit, we would find out Johnny got some skeletons in his closet. Wilmington specifically is plagued with this attitude that we will not no matter how gifted you are, how much knowledge you have, and how much experience you have.
Right.
Everybody in the country can think you're the best, but Wilmington people will not use you
Well, what's that biblical,
if they know
what's that
you.
biblical term?
A prophet
is never recognized in the hometown?
I hear that applied a lot, but I think in Wilmington it's a lot sicker than that. I think it's a lot of scared, dishonest, jealous people in Wilmington who for years have been holding on to leadership chairs who scare people. Yeah. They go say, oh, you don't want to mess with that guy.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we're doing the work anyway. Yeah. Now, that's no excuse. You're doing what you're doing. People have attempted to stop you. The Learning Center is a perfect example. You've had encounters with the law. Now you uphold the law. You represent the law. You teach children the law. You work within the parameters of the law. When I ran for mayor, it was not so much to run for the office. It was to run for the power to be considered a full citizen. Because a pardon in the state of Delaware is not a true
Pardons forgive, but they don't forget, right?
Yeah, but it's not a true pardon.
All right, wait. Let's get back to the prison thing real quick.
Absolutely.
Because I know we can go anywhere, but our show's limited, and we're going to take some callers in. One of the things that people have proposed, and I know you heard this, is letting elderly prisoners out of prison to save the state money and or to use that money for different programs as far as education.
Right.
So how do you feel about the POPS program that they're doing in other states?
I feel that program is a good program, but we have one of the brightest minds in the state of Delaware. He's incarcerated down at Smyrna, Robert Squeaky Saunders. He is responsible for much of the geriatric care work that's been done here in the state of Delaware. He has current litigation. If we don't change the laws down in the legislature with respect to older inmates, people are dying in prison who could go to a hospital, who could go to a nursing home.
The cost for them is how much? How much is the cost for them?
The cost is astronomical.
$75,000 a year?
Medicine, care, extra security.
Right. And they're homeless. They're harmless at this point. They're not going to get out and go rough and snatch ladies' pocketbooks and run down the street or nothing.
Delaware law prevents them. So you have a loved one who is literally dying, and they tell you he has hours to live, and then they're not going to bring him to the hospital until 15 minutes before his demise, and they're not going to let you in the room until after he or she has died. That is antiquated, horrific, and barbaric, and if we consider ourselves a humane state, that's a law that ought to be changed immediately.
Okay. Hey, we're going to go to phone calls right now. We're going to take some phone calls in. For those of you who know the number here, you know it. I don't know it by heart. 661
4468
4468. 661-4468. Please call in. The phones are ringing already. Welcome to Crossfire.
Well, good evening again, T. This is Josie again.
How you doing?
I'm so glad that you had Pastor D on there tonight. Hi, Pastor D.
Hi,
I
Josie.
spoke with you earlier, and maybe you can help me out and help us out. I spoke with you about my concern earlier, but before that, I want to say one thing. Chi, thanks for showing those clips. I can remember in 1996, I had the opportunity to go to Ghana, Africa, and I went to the Cape Coast, and I was torn, and I went to the place where the people were taken out and put on the ships and where they were held as slaves, men, women, all in one place.
Yes.
And as of that day when I was there, you can still smell the stench. After all these years, you can still smell the stench of them holding all those slaves in that one place as they were putting out, to put them out on the ships to take them different places. I just wanted to say that I wish everybody had the opportunity to go to sea and to tour where our slaves were held in, our people were held in jails and the Cape Coast. Now, Pastor D, I want to get to ask you to talk a little. You don't have to, because I know he's going to take more calls, about these kiosk machines that are over in Howard R. Young, where our people struggle to take money there, and they take so much money of that money that we put in so our loved ones can call home, and $6 is taken off of a plastic card, a credit card, and $3.25 is taken off of every dollar that you put in there. I want to know when this process process started, who's getting the money? And when we talk about privatizing, it seems like to me they've started.
It's already done, right.
Thank you, Josie. Let's let him answer the question.
Yeah.
And thank you, and see if
Josie,
we can answer for you.
Thank you for your
We appreciate you
for your question. The fact of the matter is, Josie, that the larger question is how and why was this done without legislation? And if it was, who voted on it and where? Where's the notice to the public? You have a machine in Gander Hill where people have to. Who is the bank? What is the financial institution? This goes.
And how does it cost $1 and $2 to make a phone call around the corner?
Watch this. This goes to Chip Flowers' issue that so many things are going on with revenue in the state of Delaware. The treasurer is saying we need to start paying attention to who we're paying and why we're paying them. Is it fair? Is it right? More importantly, that is a state facility. Is it your will to have this machine up in there where you basically got an ATM machine and you got to pay them to give your people money? Then you got to pay an exacerbated rate for the phone call. Then you got to pay $5 for a $2 bag of potato chips.
The food is high,
You got to pay $200 for a $100 TV. And all of this revenue, I said in the beginning, there's far more than the $250 million. But what I want to know is, where are the elected leaders and the politicians and the local leadership on this issue? That contributes to the recidivism rate, because a person comes out angry that my mother has had to spend so much money just to come and visit me. It busts up the possibility of a family reunion, where visits are very, very important to a person changing their way of life. You know what I mean? So the short answer is, Josie, I don't believe that this is right. I don't know where it came from, but it should be investigated, and the NAACP and the ACLU and other people ought to raise those questions on our behalf. Families
very interesting point. I mean, there's a lot of things going on, like you said about the food. I have a relative of mine that's down in Smyrna in the Max or the Shoe. The Shoes is something, I don't know exactly what the name of it is, and he called on saying everything went up. He said it doesn't affect him, doesn't bother him, but for the people who sends him money, he's now paying double for a can of tuna fish. He's now paying, all this stuff is, like you said, it's exacerbated. All the numbers are extreme. And it seems simple until you take 5,000 people buying 5,000 cans of tuna fish 3 times a week for 4 times the amount. You know, and this is what a lot of guys eat who don't eat the regular stuff. Like,
and more importantly, who's getting the contract to sell them the oodles and noodles? Now,
who's in charge of that? Who's in charge of giving the contracts out?
You take the commissary contract in the prison system. You take the contract, some $12 million or something, for the KEY program and other treatment programs. And you take the chaplains, the preachers that preach to the men.
We got another call. Let's take this call. Let's take this call.
That will make them want to change.
Hold on. Thanks for calling Crossfire. Thanks for calling Crossfire. Turn your TV down.
Hi, I want to call and say y'all doing a good job. That y'all doing a good job, but I got a nephew that got locked up here at Rodney Square, and we haven't been able to hear, or every time we call him again to hear, they tell us he's not there and stuff. And we have not been able to find out anything, why he got locked up, what he's up there for.
I'm going to make 2 suggestions. Because the person, if he's at Gander Hill, unless he's on the pod called YCOP, he would be a juvenile. If he's in the prison itself, he must be an adult. If he's an adult, then they do have the lawful right to refuse to give you information because the person is an adult. They'll tell you, wait till your family member calls you. But if the person was arrested, start with the arresting agency. You do have a right under the Freedom of Information Act, I believe, to find out where they took your loved one. Once you identify the facility, then contact the records department of the Department of Corrections in Dover. If that does not satisfy you with knowing where he is, then you need to consult with an attorney or a consultant or somebody right away to find out where, in fact, they are, with a direct call to the warden or the commissioner.
Yeah, because he got locked up in October, the middle of October.
Okay, well, that's the way you find out what's going on, and anything I can do to help you, we'll certainly try.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Chief, you got chaplains, for instance, just the chaplain department. The people who have been running the chaplains department in the Delaware prison system have been there for ages. Black preachers do not get in to preach to a largely black population.
Really?
How's that person going to change when they're not receiving messages
From
of
the people.
spirituality? So you have this closed clique or club and a chaplain's department. When somebody dies, who goes to see that person and tell them their mother, their father, their sister, their brother, their
All the
loved one
chaplains are
has
white?
passed? The majority of the chaplains are white. If they now have a few African Americans, you got the one over at the women's prison, Chaplain Earl. They have no power. They can't even bring a person down to the chaplain's office and give them a phone call if their mother died. They got to go through all kind of stuff. No one fights that fight and says, we want preachers. I got saved under Pastor Aaron Moore's preaching and Bishop Aretha Morton coming into the prison and preaching to us. Most of the men who were there with me,
they don't come anymore?
Who got saved the same time, they haven't been back to prison. What is it about that preaching that caused us and touched us on the inside? It was the identification with the preacher. We should be fighting to be a part of the chaplainry in these prisons and demanding adequate prison ministry. Every other state has it, but in Delaware, oh my God, it's controlled from the inside.
You know, Delaware, I feel like, is a mini form of apartheid, especially Wilmington. And I know that sounds crazy, but I mean it in the sense of we're a 80% black city, but yet we have an 80% white police force. You know, and every time you get stopped, it's a white officer, and it's almost like you've got to show your papers and tell them why you're here and why you're there. And I understand the high crime, and I understand that I have businesses in high crime areas. I understand the whole city, quote, is a high crime area. We're one of the worst cities that they say in the country, which a lot of us wouldn't agree with.
I don't mind, Chi. I don't mind a 100% white police force. Here's what I mind: an abuse of the United States Constitution. I represent a lady whose house was served a warrant. In the course of their executing warrant, they took every computer, every cell phone, they took every gadget she had. Now, wait a minute. It was cleared. No. It was her nephew or some young person. There was cleared. None of her belongings were involved in any case. The police told her, the Attorney General's office said, your stuff has been cleared, we'll give it back. She's been waiting months. No one will give her things back. You know what that is? Taxation without representation. When a young black man walks down the street very quickly and he has $200 in his pocket and a policeman stops him, stop and frisk, okay, stop and frisk me. But you take my $200 and tell me, do you have a receipt for this? Like a black man can't have $200 in America. You don't do that. You don't go down on Market Street and stop everybody at lunchtime and tell them if you got $200 in your pocket. No. When the government, the police are representatives of the government, sticks its hand in the pocket of any citizen and takes from them, that is taxation without representation, unless there's a duly sworn warrant somewhere that says you want my $200.
Let's take this. Crossfire. Thank you for calling Crossfire. Turn your phone down.
Peace. Can you, hello?
Yes. Turn your TV down.
My TV is not up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Peace. How are you?
Fine.
This is Sister Freedom. I want to say thank you, Pastor D. And T, this is your God sister, Sister Freedom. But I wanted to say something since you was mentioning something about constitutional rights. I got to turn this down because it's doubling.
Got to turn the TV down.
Yeah, I got to turn it down. Well, first of all, the pardon board, what they're doing is double jeopardy. That's already been mentioned to them that they are doing double jeopardy and your due process rights are being violated tremendously. And that's my fight with them. Because if you've already been tried, convicted, or if it's been discharged, dismissed, nolly processed, it's over. For it to still be on your record is a violation of your constitutional rights, okay? To have to go in front of a hearing again is considered double jeopardy, and it's against your constitutional rights, okay? Second of all, you mentioned something about them going in your pocket, okay? Did you know that the police officers that stop you and put your hand in their pocket and take your money gets 80% of whatever money that they find in your pocket?
That's a law? I never heard of
no,
that.
I did.
Oh, they get 80% of whatever the money is that they find in your pocket. And not only that, they get a bonus for every drug dealer they so-called find on the street. So which means some of the police officers can set them up, okay?
Right.
Put drugs on them, and then they get a bonus at work. You understand?
Yeah. Now, I didn't know and don't know that that is true, but I want to go to a point you made. You made the point about...
Sister Freedom, thank you for calling. We're going to comment on it.
You made the point about charges. She makes a good point about how a record can ruin your life.
Right.
I went after a pardon not because I necessarily needed one to get work, Chig,
right,
but because I want full citizenship. Again,
right,
it pains me to see my elected officials on television arguing for a path to citizenship
right,
for immigrant citizens, and I agree they should have a path to citizenship, right, but they get amnesty, they're calling it. Okay. Give them amnesty so they can vote for me, and Hispanic people can like me because I voted for amnesty for them. But there is no amnesty for the black man born on American soil who made a mistake, paid taxes all the way, served many times in the United States military. Right. He doesn't get any amnesty. He gets no path to citizenship. He cannot vote, many times cannot drive, and cannot work. That I consider to be an affront to an entire race of people.
In Delaware, is it true that you can't get a pardon? You can only get a pardon if you have felonies. You can't get pardons for misdemeanor charges?
No, there's the expunge process and there's a pardon process. Now, the public defenders will start calling here and saying, well, Pastor D ain't no lawyer. Right. Either them or they have an employee, Toby. Right. I call him, he'll call in and straighten me out.
Hold on. Let's listen to him. Crossfire. You're on Crossfire. Cut your phone down.
This is also Sister Freedom again.
Hi, Sister
Freedom.
Freedom.
You mentioned something about pardons, and you said something about the felonies, okay? You can't even get expunged until you go in front of the pardon board first.
Right.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Okay?
Right.
And not only that, you cannot ever get a job. Well, you can if you lucky get a job. Your whole life is ruined. It's a setup.
That's what I just
It's
said.
worse than Jim Crow. It is more black men in jail today than it was in 1850 enslaved. Okay?
Wow.
The whole situation is a setup.
Yeah. Well, so we got to fight it, sis. When we fight, we win. And more people like you, your voice has to be heard. We got to speak truth to power and not call this other stuff that people are speaking
And wait a minute, Pastor D. But Pastor D, you mentioned something about them no longer being able to vote. Well, it's also against the law for them not to be able to vote, but then you want them to work and pay taxes.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
I said that. No taxation.
Okay, but I'm saying it's all a setup.
Right.
Everything's set up, and if you check how many people that are in jail, you'll see who they're targeting. The poor people and the poor people of color that's living in what you call so-called the ghetto communities, okay?
Right. Right.
All right. Hey, Sister Freedom, may take another call. We appreciate your call.
Ahead.
All right. Thank you for calling Crossfire.
Good evening, Chief, Pastor D.
Hi.
Not only are the inmates paying $200 for a $100 TV, they're paying $80 for a $30 pair of sneakers,
right,
paper, pencils,
right.
And not only are the job situation there, the inmates, black inmates that are educated, had businesses, they are taking those jobs from those inmates and giving them to the white inmates that are not qualified.
Yeah, we got.
There needs to be a total investigation or turnover of the entire system.
Yeah,
right,
I agree that there needs to be oversight. There needs
Absolutely.
and not the usual suspects. Not the brothers and sisters who go in there and scratch where they don't itch and tell us a lot of things that aren't true. I get on average 90 or so letters a month from different inmates within the prison system. I have access because of some of the older wardens and stuff who have been around who don't mind letting me in. But sooner or later they're going to cut that off because it's just not to their benefit to continue to allow a Pastor D. But it is a new form of Jim Crow. It's actually not new. It's another form of Jim Crow.
Let's take another call. Thank you for calling Crossfire.
Hi, I just wanted to say, in the state of Vermont and Maine, inmates are allowed to vote.
Yeah.
Do you think
In
that
14,
Delaware-
I think it's 14 states in our country.
So why hasn't Delaware moved on that initiative?
Because we
the
haven't fought for it.
politicians would not like for people who are incarcerated with records to be able to vote, because many of them wouldn't be in office today if the right people voted and had the rights to vote.
Yeah.
They know that, so they would never push for that, because a lot of people incarcerated wouldn't vote for the people who are in office.
Yeah,
So
that
that doesn't behoove them.
Yeah, let me say this. I wanted badly. I grew up under Dennis Williams, and I'm a great supporter of Mayor Williams. I ran to expand our base so that I knew they would take my picture going into the voting booth, and they did. And I knew that thousands of formerly incarcerated people would see it and say, well, if D did it, I can do it.
Right.
And that is why things haven't changed, because enough of us, because there are a lot of formerly incarcerated people walking around Wilmington with their head in the sand who are not sharing their background with people.
Right.
So one of the first things we got to do is let people know from whence we came. The other thing we got to do is we got to fight. We got to fight. I preached today at my church, fight the powers that be, from Flavor Flav and Public Enemy. We got to fight the powers that be, because time is upon us. And this prison system, particularly here in the state of Delaware, the murder rate on the street is being influenced by it.
Well, how many
the dropout rate
solving?
is
How
being
many
influenced
How many
by
are they
it.
solving? They spend a lot of time, cops spend a lot of time on useless, senseless stuff, but how many crimes and murders are they really solving? How many unsolved murders do we have?
Yeah.
You know, I talked about a few weeks ago, about a month ago, my daughter was pulled over, college student, never had a record, never been in trouble, and 6 cop cars came.
Right.
You know, and which took time away from obviously something else that could have been going on.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
and
we
spend time on
we
stuff
got a
like
couple
that,
of situations,
you know.
Chi. We have a couple of situations. I do believe this new initiative, and I'm not authorized to speak on it.
Okay.
But I'm aware that Mayor Williams does have an initiative in motion.
Yeah.
That's going to make a difference in
Let
this
me tell you
town.
something. I applaud Mayor Williams.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if something ain't working, he'll say that's not working. Let's try something new.
Right.
He won't just
Well,
stick
he
to
from
what
the
he
hood.
says. You know, but some people will go along to get along. Some people stick with what
Right.
they're saying. It's the rule I made. I'm gonna stick with it. He said that ain't working. Let's
Right.
try something different. So
Right.
he has taken different approaches to solving crime.
Right.
And I think he's had some. Like Barack, people have gotten away and tried to, you know, wrestle with him for
Right.
power.
Right.
And they have, I guess they would call them urinating in the win contest and stuff like that. But
Right.
I think he's doing an awesome job of trying new things and
Yeah.
bringing new people, you know, to the table to try to figure out that
Right.
this problem is bigger than him trying to figure it out.
Right.
And it's going to take everyone,
Right.
ex-offenders,
Right.
non-offenders,
Yeah. We need housing.
the preachers, you know,
Right.
everyone to participate in the process
Right.
of advancing our people.
Right. We need housing programs. We need jobs. We need education programs for everybody coming out of the system right now. And most of all, we need them introduced to faith systems. If it's Muslim, if it's Muslim. If it's Buddhist, it's Buddhist. Whatever it is, nobody's going to come out of that atmosphere and survive in this atmosphere without a spiritual change. And so if we cannot get them to come to us when they get out, we got to find a way to get in. But every preacher, every pastor.
How do we start getting into the prison system? Because I say this, that reentry should start the moment you get locked up, right? It starts as soon as you get locked up.
Pre-entry, right.
But now as soon as you're there, you got 7 years. Okay, in the last 2-3 years, I think we need to have like a desensitization process that would allow
debriefing
that would allow us to say, to get rid of, because prison ways, for those people who don't know, it can be tough. Depending on where you are. There's some prisons that I'm glad I didn't have to go to.
Yeah,
you know,
have hit on
like
something.
Oz,
You have
know?
hit on something. Our failure, when I say our, I'm talking about those of us who have gotten out and have made other mistakes. First of all, people, the church or people of faith have to be more tolerant and patient with those of us who come out of the system. I came home academically and intellectually ready to be a good guy, law-abiding citizen. Sexually and morally, I was a mess. No
how many years
no
ago?
one helped me. 15 and a half years in the
15
system.
and a half years? That's
No one.
Everybody be a little sexually frustrated.
There was no class on here's how you become a
Reacclimate.
faithful husband. Nobody helped me with that.
Right.
But everybody criticized.
Oh, yeah.
So as I stumbled and fell over the years, it takes years to rehabilitate and change yourself coming out of that system. And as I changed over the years, I began to understand that I was dealing with a new anxiety and a new level of stress of trying to prove myself to my own people that were intolerant and impatient. Now I've come to a place where I understand that people who are coming out, we can't tolerate bad behavior, but we certainly have to help people. The Bible says, if a brother or sister be overtaken in a fall, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. I had preachers in their
real quick,
pulpits.
break that down for me. You know what I'm saying? You break that down for me. It means
restore
if he falls
them.
down, to get him back up and help him get back on their feet.
Get them back up. Meekness in that text in the Greek means self-control.
Okay.
It means help them to control themselves.
Okay.
Help them learn some self-control.
Okay.
Now, if somebody would help me with that, I would have avoided 6 of the last scandals out of my 30 since I've been out.
Right.
But when you weigh it against criminality and all the other things that people deal with when they come home, I'm batting 100. You know what I mean? So we must help people and be patient.
I understand. And I think you did a good job of owning up, you know, for failures and shortcomings that you've had. A lot of people will just try to run and evasive, because when it comes to being evasive verbally, you could be very evasive. You're very articulate and intelligent, but you stood up, you stared adversity right in the face, and I admire you for that. Like Martin Luther King, one of the great quoters ever said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in moments of controversy and turmoil. And even in the midst of your controversy and turmoil, you still stood up. You still held your head high. You still fought. You still did what you had to do. And everybody likes a comeback story. So, you know, I'm glad to see you on the comeback trail. I'm glad to see you. And I don't mean literally like, you know, you coming back like you felt like that, but you understand what I'm saying.
You fall from grace in people's minds, you know.
You know what I'm saying?
I've had very high highs, Chi. You went with me and met Barack Obama. I've had the pleasure of being with him several times. I travel with Dr. Bill Cosby. I get to do a lot of things. But I've had very low lows where you're isolated and alone and you just want to go back to prison.
In life, they say, never let your highs get too high and never let your lows get too low. Pastor, thank you for coming on. Hey, this is Chi. I done took over from Norman Oliver Community Crossfire. You know, I hope I did a great job. If you guys talk to Norman, I know he's partying at the Super Bowl. I hope you guys tell Norman
he may be in the Super Bowl
if he's watching it. Hopefully I'll be back on here as a guest, but next week check me out at 5:30 on Sunday. Big shouts out to Lap and all my friends. Pastor D, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me, G.
All right.